Another year has come and gone, another year of great video games played and beaten. But I think 2024, while there were plenty of great games, many of which I still have not had the opportunity to play, it just felt like it was a little bit quieter than 2023. And that was to the benefit of my wallet, to the benefit of my backlog, and it really just felt like I didn't have to chase my tail as much this year when it came to playing games. But hello everyone and welcome back to another video, a very special one, and probably my favorite video that I record in any given year. It's when we have the opportunity to look back on the year that was, reflect on all of the games that we beat and played, and then take that list, however large or however small it is, and whittle it down to 10 or whatever it is that your top games played in any given year looks like. And mine's a little bit unique, and I need to preface this by saying that I don't always, or rarely do I ever, only keep the games that came out in a given year on my top 10. So there will be games on my top 10 this year that did not come out in 2024, but I think it's important, at least for me, and this is what makes every list and every person and their top 10 special, is to highlight the games that I played no matter the year, because these lists for me are really meant to kind of cement the 10 best games that I played in a year, again, regardless of the year that they released. But we have a whole lot to get into. Hopefully this video finds you well and it finds you relaxing. Maybe you have some time off work here around the holiday season. I know I am drinking a nice piping hot large cup of coffee. I don't normally go for large, but when you have a child, you upgrade and you drink more coffee. It's just all part of the experience. But very excited to record this and share my top 10 games of the year, including some honorable mentions. So please, before we get started, let me know down below in the comment section, what were some of your favorite games of 2024? Maybe also include, what are some games that you didn't have an opportunity to play? Indiana Jones just released. It probably would have easily made it into my top 10 games of this year, but I had to cap it at some point so I could get this video out the door. And again, there's so much stuff that I still haven't had an opportunity to play, like Dragon's Dogma 2, Stellar Blade, Armored Core 6, among a lot of other stuff. So let me know down in the comments section below, what were some of your favorite games of 2024? What were some games that you didn't have an opportunity to play? And what are you playing right now while you're watching this video? Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, to kick off my honorable mentions, we have a game that is, or was, 10 years in the making. A long-running franchise that I just never thought we were ever going to see return, but thankfully we have. I put quite a bit of time into it, and this is something that most people probably fast forward in the video and have no interest in hearing about, but I have to highlight it. College Football 25. I, of course, have the PlayStation 5 copy here. One of the first things I did was create a character of my own likeness. He naturally had to have quite a bit more hair than I did. He went to Northwestern, a quarterback. We went all the way to the national championship. I won the Heisman, an incredible time, road to glory, an awesome mode. You have Dynasty, all the other bells and whistles that you expect from a college football game. But I think what's most interesting about the road to glory mode, where you create a character of your own, is that it's not like the normal franchise or Dynasty mode in a given football sports game where you control everyone on the field when they have the ball, or if you're playing defense and you have an aerial view of everything. In this particular mode, when you create a character, you're seeing it from the perspective of your character in their given position. So me being the quarterback, once I throw the ball to a wide receiver or I hand it off to running back, I no longer have control of the game. So it really puts a tremendous amount on your shoulders, given your unique skill position, to have as much of an impact on the game as you can in an effort to put your team in a position to win the game. So for a school like Northwestern, not sure how much the audience knows about football, not typically a great football school. So a lot was on Rusty Lewis, the quarterback, and we made a great run of it. We went to the national championship. We beat Ohio State. It was a nail biter. I think we even went to might have been a double overtime game. It was kind of wild. And I won the national championship. But I'm just so glad that college football is back. I don't know if I'll buy it year over year, but I'm sure this is one that I'll continue to come back to for years to come. And really glad that college football, it's back in full force. Now, my next honorable mention is something that never in my wildest dreams would I've imagined there to be a video game adaptation. It is based on an Akira Toriyama manga that I love, and I vividly remember going to Borders bookstore, picking up off the shelf and taking home and falling in love with. and that is Sandland. I was so thrilled when I saw that initial trailer reveal, and I thought this was going to be a easy cash grab to kind of go alongside that, I think, new Netflix or Hulu mini series that was released, also an anime adaptation of the manga, but it could not be the furthest thing from that. This is actually a really well-made open world action RPG based on the manga series, where you play as this fun little band of characters, and essentially water is a essential commodity in this deserted wasteland, and it kind of borrows ideas and themes from stuff like Mad Max, but it has kind of the graphical style of something like Borderlands. And so if you're into easygoing, easy on the mind, open world action RPGs, this is definitely one to pick up. The melee combat isn't anything to write home about, but I think what really sets the game apart is the tank combat. And there are other vehicles that you can also unlock, upgrade throughout the game, and kind of collect. And I think it probably takes about 25 to 30 hours to complete. I did not have an opportunity to roll credits because I played it for like 15 hours, and it wasn't just something at that particular time I was ready to go all in on. I think it says less about the game and more about just my state of mind when I played it. But definitely a favorite of the year. Had to give it a special shout out and highlight here in my games of the year, even if it's only an honorable mention. But Akira Toriyama, God rest his soul, unfortunately lost him earlier this year, gone way too soon. And if this is one of the final games that he had a hand in being a part of developing, I think it's definitely a great send-off for him. Although I would like to think that Dragon Quest XII is something that he was still able to lend his kind of creative force for that game whenever we end up seeing it. But Sandland, highlight of the year, definitely worth picking up if you're a fan of action RPGs. And speaking of action RPGs, we have one final honorable mention here, and this is one that I did not anticipate picking up, but when I was looking at games coming out in 2024, around this time last year, I saw this game. The graphical style was very striking. It kind of had a semi-cel shaded look, not unlike Sandland, but a little bit more striking, a little bit more unique. And the battle system kind of seemed to resemble a little bit of the Tales of series. So think Vesperia, Arise, and also a little bit of Xenoblade, but not much of like the hotbar. It was just kind of like the character animations and the way they were kind of going about their movements in combat. And I ended up picking it up. A really nice special edition here. Comes with a pretty sizable 120-page art book, some postcards among other things. And I got around to playing this late in the year. Really enjoyed my time with it. The story is not anything to write home about, but what I will say is if you're looking for an action RPG that only takes about 15 to 20 hours to roll credits, definitely look no further. Granblue Fantasy Relink definitely scratches that action RPG fix without needing to put 50 to 100 hours into it to roll credits. But beyond that, it has a questing structure that reminds me quite a bit of something like Monster Hunter. I've never really been able to get into the Monster Hunter series. I played quite a bit of World, but when I go into those zoned areas to complete a quest, I want to freely explore. I want to do more. I want to go back into that open world and kind of find treasure chests and find hidden things around the world, and then come back to that hub area and still talk to NPCs. And I haven't been able to quite get that from a Monster Hunter game. I feel like this strikes a better balance where it allows the player to have a bit more freedom to freely walk around and explore the world while still doing those kind of shorter, more contained quests, side quests going out into the opened, zoned areas of the world. So plenty of endgame content. While you can beat and power through the main story in about 15 to 20 hours, I think there's easily an additional 80 hours of content here in the game, and you can also play online co-op with friends. I think you can play the entirety of the game that way. So again, had to mention this as well as an honorable mention. Didn't quite sneak its way into the top 10 because the story just really wasn't anything memorable, nor were there really any memorable characters to speak of, but it scratched that action RPG fix when I was looking for that, and you didn't have to put 80 hours to finish it. All right, we are getting into my top 10 games of the year, and at the top was just another surprise. Maybe that's what 2024 is this the year of surprises and games that never would have anticipated coming out, like Sandland, like College Football 25, and certainly Tintin Reporter, Cigars of the Pharaoh, a game I talked about briefly in a recent pickups video. I am a tremendous fan of the Adventures of Tintin comic book series. I read it as a kid, so when I was browsing the Best Buy app on my phone and I saw a limited edition with Steelbook game based on the Adventures of Tintin comics, I had to pick it up, and I was pleasantly surprised to find a Professor Layton meets Telltale's Walking Dead type of adventure where there's a heavy emphasis on puzzle solving, going through these very A to B levels in a Telltale's type of game. But I have to highlight and make sure I emphasize that this game is not going to be for everyone. I don't think if you don't have an affinity for the comic book series or that Steven Spielberg movie and Peter Jackson movie that came out about 10 years ago, I don't know if this is gonna be worth picking up unless you get it on the super cheap, because there is quite a bit of unpolished. The game crashed on me at least twice, but for what when I was able to make it through the game, it really just reminded me of why I fell in love with the comic book series, where you have Tintin, this young, aspiring reporter, kind of think young Indiana Jones, goes on these adventures, traveling all across the world, doing his reporter-like duties with his little dog Snowy, with a reoccurring cast of characters that, again, just takes me back to those times when I was in my bedroom as a kid, poring over those giant comic book pages. I was able to get that in video game form here with a nice 10 to 12 hour little Telltale's Professor Layton puzzle solving adventure. So not for everyone, but if you can pick it up on the cheap, worth it, and definitely a standout game for me as someone who loved the Adventures of Tintin comics growing up. Now, the next several games on my list are digital-only games, many of which I don't know if there's actually physical copies for these, but if there ever were to be, I would certainly seek them out. The first of which, and you know, if you are a longtime follower of the channel, especially if you've watched my top 10 lists over the years, there always has to be 3D platformer representation, especially on the indie side. I love playing the Marios and the Kirbys and the everything else's of the world, but I much more enjoy seeking out those kind of hidden gem 3D platformers. And coming in at number 9 is certainly fits that bill, and that is The Spirit and the Mouse. I kind of accidentally stumbled across the developer's Twitter page when they were kind of advertising this game earlier in the year. And when I saw gameplay of it, I was like, yes, this is my kind of 3D platformer. It is set in this quaint, quiet little French village. The developers are actually just a 2-person indie studio based out of Canada. And so you play as this mouse, and in the very beginning of the game, as the name might imply, he's climbing up this building to fetch an item. He gets kind of an electrical shock that happens to him, and then based on that, he gets these kind of electrical powers. And so once he has these powers, you can virtually zap anything in the level. And when you do that, you kind of collect these electrical shards, which acts as a currency in the game. And you use that electricity power to do deeds around the village for a variety of these NPCs. And so you might walk up to a windowsill and you overhear someone in a bar or a cafe talking about wanting to watch a particular TV program, and then you find out that the power went out, so then you have to climb a number of different ledges and maybe solve a puzzle or two in an effort to restore power to that person's house. And so it's one of those very easy on the minds 3D platformers where there's no combat to really speak of, there's no enemies wandering around the level, no 3-button boss clicks like a Bowser or anything like that. You're just wandering this village with a very peaceful, soft piano soundtrack to kind of complement, doing deeds for all these different characters around the village, and collecting a ton of things and collectibles along the way. Reminded me quite a bit of Tinykin when that game came out, where, again, no combat to speak of. It's just a real joy to kind of scale the verticality of these levels up and down, left to right, find all the different collectibles, and of course complete many of the objectives along the way to complete the story. One that you can probably finish in 5 to 10 hours depending on your completionist mindset, but One of my favorites of the year for sure, and one I don't think I've heard a single person speak of to this point. So if you're into 3D platformers, I cannot recommend this enough. I think you can get it on all platforms, PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. It's Spirit and the Mouse. Now, with the continued theme of games that surprise me, I was surprised to find out that Clap Hands, who has previously developed the Hot Shots Golf series for PlayStation for a number of years, they went on to make Everybody's Golf for PS4, and then they kind of changed their development focus to mobile games, unfortunately. But one of the mobile games that they made, they ended up porting to the Nintendo Switch, and that is Easy Come, Easy Golf, which is maybe not the best title in the world, but it certainly is a memorable game that I played this year because it took me back to playing Hot Shots Golf 3 and 4 on the PS2 as a kid, and eventually Open T on the PSP. And it's your classic 3-button click system like Mario Golf, but if you're like me and Superstar Golf or whatever it was that came out on the Switch not too long ago, if that didn't scratch the itch that you were hoping for of the Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, or even Toadstool Tour Mario Golf of the past, look no further to get your classic arcadey golf fix than Easy Come, Easy Golf on the Switch. It's $20, and instead of having a story mode of sorts, there's more of a world tour that you do in single player mode, where you don't create a character of your own, nor are you unlocking the next best character in Hot Shots Golf fashion. Instead, you almost have a party of characters that you take to each tournament, or that you take to face that next character that you'll eventually unlock. And then those characters almost have attributes and skills that continue to upgrade and rise in rank the more you use them. It's essentially like JRPG characters or your Pokemon party of characters as they continue to level up. The more you use them, that's essentially the gameplay loop of Easy Come, Easy Golf. And what I liked about that is it added an additional element of strategy to the game, where if you have a character that can hit the ball really far, you're probably going to want to make sure that you place them on the par 5, and then if someone has more accuracy, maybe place them on the par 3 hole. Things like that just kind of mixes up the tried and true Hot Shots formula, and I appreciated that about the game. But again, you can get this for $20. This is something that I will continue to come back to and play for years to come. Maybe someday Clap Hands will come back to the PlayStation and develop Everybody's Golf 2 or Hot Shots Golf 6 for the PlayStation 6. But in the absence of that, we have Easy Come, Easy Golf to fall back on the Nintendo Switch.
Nice shot!
Next up, we have another big surprise from me this year, and I have to first give a shout out to my good friend Alex, or Return to Mother Base here on YouTube. He asked me to be a part of a podcast that he started earlier this year on his YouTube channel, where we pick a particular game based on a genre that his guest is very fond of. So naturally, for me, it was platformers. He gave me an entire list of games to select from, and little did he know there was one game that had been on my radar for quite some time, but I hadn't gotten around to playing it yet, and that is the Song of Nunu, a League of Legends story. Now, this has gone pretty under the radar as far as I'm concerned, because I've not really heard many people talk about it. It has a really just heartfelt graphical style to it that reminds me of something like a DreamWorks animated film, and even from a story side of things and the characters that are in this game, it's kind of like How to Train Your Dragon meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. You're playing as this young kid who has unfortunately lost his mom, and he kind of has to go on this journey of self-discovery to kind of confront the past with his buddy Willump, who is a giant yeti. So naturally, they get into all kinds of antics along the way, but unlike the Spirit and the Mouse, which I talked about earlier as this very easygoing, exploration-focused 3D platformer with little to no combat, the Song of Nunu is kind of the other side of the 3D platforming coin, where it's that PS2 era action 3D platformer that has quite a bit more puzzle solving. There is a bit more action in fighting enemies, in addition to the platforming elements as well. And the developers were clearly inspired by a number of different games, one of which is definitely Uncharted, because you have the classic wall climbing and ledge sliding sections of platforming, but then also you have this flute that you use that reminds me quite a bit of something like the Ocarina of Time, but they really use it much more on the puzzle solving side of things. And even in some of the boss battles, you'll use this flute. But what I liked about that is it really kind of slowed down the gameplay a little bit. You really have to kind of analyze a particular area, whether you're in a cave or you're out in the wilderness somewhere, of, okay, I understand that I have to get this platform to raise up. I might have to use Willump to go step on or pull a lever in an area that I can't quite reach now. How do I use the flute to my advantage in that situation? So there's quite a bit of that, but I can't emphasize enough that this really brought me back to the PS2 era of like licensed action 3D platformers, a genre that is kind of sorely missing nowadays, I feel like, but I also can't emphasize enough just how heartwarming and moving a little story this game was too. It definitely brought a little bit of a tear to my eye before the credits rolled. So if you're looking for something that, again, a little easy on the mind, but has some classic PS2 era 3D platforming energy to it, look no further than The Song of Nunu, a League of Legends story. All right, now we're getting into a game that was quite higher on my list until I played a couple of other games that just snuck past it. But that is Ubisoft's Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. I talked a lot about this game in a recent pickups video, so I'll try not to go on too long here in my Game of the Year segments. But most people probably forgot about this game because it came out in December of last year, and I just don't think that's a great launch window for any game. But beyond that, it's an Ubisoft open world, and I think a lot of people are just tired of that classic gameplay formula. But I think Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora really sets itself apart because it doesn't feel as check-the-box in nature as some of the Assassin's Creed, Far Cry type games are. And it's easy to kind of just say that this game on the back of the box is Far Cry set in the world of Pandora, and there is quite a bit of truth to that. But I think similar to when you go and see the James Cameron Avatar movies in the theaters, you're not going for this very compelling, moving, memorable story. You're going for the experience of putting on your 3D glasses and immersing yourself in a really breathtaking, beautiful world in Pandora. And the same can be said here about the game Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. It is an experience going through these environments, and especially if you're playing on the PlayStation 5 using that DualSense controller, you feel the sensation of brushing past plants. When you're walking across water, you feel that effect throughout the controller. And then certainly whenever you're using your bow and arrow, or even guns for that matter, you feel the resistance on the trigger buttons when you pull back that bow or you're pulling the trigger on that gun. And so in the same way that those films are an experience, this game was too. I put well over 40 hours into it, wandering its open world, trying to 100% complete all of the outposts that you might expect in a Far Cry game. You can play it in a stealth-like fashion, you can go in guns blazing, the choice is up to you, but my goodness, one of the most breathtaking, beautiful, and immersive open worlds in any game I have ever played. I cannot emphasize that enough. You can probably get it for $20 to $30 nowadays. It's worth picking up at that price. I would even argue it's worth picking up at full price. But one of my favorite games of the year, and rivals the likes of The Witcher and Skyrim with how immersive it is. Even if the story is about as mid as it comes, they introduce the main villain in the first 30 minutes. I don't think you see him until the final hour of the game, and it takes about 30 hours to beat. So if that tells you anything. But everything is fully voice acted. The production value is certainly there. If Ubisoft, we have to give them credit for anything, it's just they create very detailed, immersive open worlds, and Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora is certainly no exception.
A new bond. It is wondrous to fly on thought alone, to touch the mind of another, your hearts beating as one. You must secure the bond with a final act of trust.
How do I...
All for your Iklan! Fly high together and secure the bond!
Yes! We did it, girl! You did it! Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's think. Feel what to do. Can you go faster? Whoa! That's it! Let's dive! Whoa!
Now, I mentioned at the top of this video that I recently became a father, and during those first few weeks of having a newborn, it is a blur. If you know, you know. So I was looking to play something a little easy on the mind, and there were 2 games on the Switch that really stood out, and I'm sure will continue to be games I think about and look back fondly on in the years to come as a reminder for those first few weeks and months taking care of my newborn daughter. One of which is a game that I wrote off, to be perfectly honest, for a long time. And honestly, this series, I feel like I just needed to walk away from because I was tired of the developer not having enough time to polish it up the way I think this series rightfully deserves. And that's the Pokemon series. Game Freak, I'm talking about you. But the game I'm specifically referencing is Pokemon Legends Arceus. My goodness, I owe an apology to Game Freak, and I owe an apology to this game. Maybe it's more of a reflection of my state of mind, being sleep deprived and only having enough energy to wander a relatively empty open world and throw Pokeballs at Pokemon. But regardless, I think that is too reductive and it's too insulting for this game, because there is the bones and the structure of Arceus really deserves a lot of credit. And I cannot wait to see what they do with the recently announced sequel into next year, one I'm very much anticipating. But the simple gameplay loop of being a Pokemon researcher in the world or the region of Sinnoh and going out and completing a number of different requests or side quests for NPCs in that village, and then beyond that for the main Pokemon research person, going out and either collecting the same Pokemon a number of different times, battling it at different times in the day, catching it in different environments, and then using different attack types on the Pokemon to see what it's weak or strong against, was the, I guess, shake up to the tried and true Pokemon formula I didn't know I wanted, but really thoroughly enjoyed. And it cannot be overstated that just going out into an open world and seeing some of your favorite Pokemon or Pokemon you've never really seen or been familiar with, and being able to, in a very stealth-like fashion, crawl through the grass or walk up behind them, throw a Pokeball, catch them, and just move on. It's just seamlessly able to wander these giant environments, see Pokemon throughout the day life cycle, different Pokemon appear, catch them, in some cases battle them, and there's no real stoppage to the gameplay. It's just all in real time, even if, again, there's some pop-in, there's some slowdown, the frame rate can be a little questionable at times. I think that formula of just swapping different Pokemon in and out of your party, every time they evolve, it is a spectacle, and it just brings a smile to your face. And the fact that there really was no gyms. There were some Pokemon battles in this that you had to, pull out your Pokemon, fight someone, but that's not the focus of the game. The focus is on exploration, it's discovery, it's wandering environments, and that surprise and delight when you come across an Electabuzz or a Rapidash or a Pokemon that you recognize, holy crap, I'm not ready for this. I need to hightail it out of here because I'm going to get my butt whooped if I interact with that Pokemon. It has that Breath of the Wild feel to it as well, and just a real surprise for me. And I think I needed that time away from Pokemon to be able to come back and feel refreshed and reminded why I loved Pokemon to begin with back in the late 90s when I got my Game Boy Color and my copy of Pokemon Red. So if you're like me and you're like, my gosh, this game needs a fresh coat of paint, they needed more development time, what the heck is Game Freak doing? Give it another shot, all right? Go in be a little patient, and just see that, you know what? There's actually a really, really good game beneath the lack of voice acting and needing to mash through like 9 million boxes of dialogue. That is one thing. Please, for the love of God, Pokemon, Game Freak, let's get some voice actors in here. Even if they voice like 25% of the dialogue, I would probably remember something about this story in 3 months from now, but because I had to mash through so many boxes of dialogue, I'm not going to. Also, what the heck is up with the Dark Souls boss battles in this? Wild stuff, okay? But Pokemon Legends Arceus was a really good time, and one that I have no doubt I'll look back on these first few months of being with my daughter, remembering that between diapers and bottle feeds, I was catching Pokemon and having a really good time. All right, now we're getting into the best of the best, the top 4 games of the year for me. But before I share this game, I do want to preface this by saying the internet needs to calm down. Especially we as fans of video games. We need, in my opinion, to have more tolerance for 7 out of 10 games. Okay, because on the Xbox and 360, PS3 and Wii days, we ate that stuff up. We were fans of it. There were YouTube videos out the wazoo highlighting hidden gems that more often than not were like 6 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10 type games. We all knew about the Marios, the Uncharteds, the Mass Effects of the world. But it's nice to pull back the curtain on some of the games that were not perfect. They have their flaws, but we still appreciate what is there. And we got to appreciate Star Wars Outlaws. Okay, I had to pull out my R2 Christmas sweater to talk about a game that I was really, looking forward to coming into this year. Uncharted in a Star Wars world? Han Solo type character? Kind of playing as that Nathan Drake type character in a Star Wars universe? Sign me the heck up. Now, granted, I did get this on sale for $30 on Black Friday, and I'm so glad I did. It has its flaws. Okay, let's start there. Character animations, facial animations, there's a lot of stuff that needs to change there, all right? And I think Ubisoft is hard at work patching and trying to work on some of those things. The game crashed on me once. There's some issues there. Story is mid. This main character, Kay, she really acts more as a protagonist that doesn't really evolve or grow over the course of the game. She's really just a vessel to continue to push the story forward. And the gameplay itself, you're shooting your little blaster gun. There's no lightsabers. It doesn't really build on itself. You can make upgrades to your blaster gun, but it doesn't really make it feel any different than it did when you got it in the very beginning of the game. But I go back to that comparison of the Xbox 360 and PS3 era where, you know what? There were plenty of games that the gameplay itself didn't really build on itself that much, but you were still okay with it being that kind of relatively bare bones third-person shooter. And that's what Star Wars Outlaws is. It is attempting to be Uncharted in a Star Wars universe with a heavy emphasis on stealth. You have your classic grappling hook to get to that next platform, lots of wall climbing in Uncharted-like fashion, plenty of cover-based shooting that like Nathan Drake does. But I'll go back to my comments about Pokemon Legends Arceus, where I just needed a break from the Pokemon series for a while. I think there's a lot of truth to distance genuinely makes the heart grow fonder, and that's been the case for me with Star Wars. Listen, I grew up watching the original trilogy. I had the action figures. I loved going to the theater and watching Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and eventually Revenge of the Sith. And I've enjoyed some of the TV shows that have recently come out as well. But I was so burnt, as many longtime Star Wars fans were, on the sequel trilogy. And it is difficult for me to even think about those 3 movies for the level of excitement I had going into or walking away from The Force Awakens. And I thought, wow, there's so much to build upon here. And we had all the fan theories and excitement leading up to Last Jedi and eventually The Rise of Skywalker. And it was just a jumbled mess, all right? There was never any clear direction for those 3 films. We all know that. I think we can all agree upon that. I was just tired. I had Star Wars fatigue. I haven't watched like the last 9 Disney Plus TV shows because I just needed a break from Star Wars. But playing Star Wars Outlaws and being in the open world that Ubisoft created, especially since this takes place in the original trilogy time frame, holy moly, I was reminded why I loved Star Wars. That John Williams signature score that you kind of hear highlights of in this game. Moments in this when you're literally infiltrating an Imperial base and stealthily making your way, taking out stormtroopers, eventually grabbing a stormtrooper rifle and being able to use and shoot that, and it actually feeling like it genuinely resembles the stormtrooper blaster rifles that I saw in the movies when I was a kid. And then when you need to flee that Imperial base and you're flying a giant ship in space and TIE fighters start chasing you through the galaxy and you're doing barrel rolls and trying to make your way out of that and dogfighting in space, there's just such a thrill and a rush that just feels so authentically Star Wars that I was just in love, smiling ear to ear most of the time while playing this game. There's so many other moments that I don't want to spoil, but I feel like if you are a long-time Star Wars fan, you owe yourself, give this game a try, okay? You don't need to pick it up for $70. Wait for a sale. Pick it up for $20 to $30 when it inevitably drops in price. But there's so many moments that are clear nods to Star Wars fans, but it's not like some of these TV shows where it's like, oh, let's just bring Luke Skywalker back to, strike the fancy and nostalgic strings of all the longtime fans, because they're really small, subtle moments, some of which you'll miss. Like, you might be crawling through a vent and you'll hear characters talking. When you look out the vent, you're like, holy crap, is that who I think it is? Yeah, that's exactly who I think it is. Moments like that are so cool, brings me right back to when I was a kid watching my Star Wars VHS tapes growing up, and there's just still so much for me to do in this game. I just rolled credits the other night, and I cannot wait to go back into this world, do a lot of the side quests, probably eventually get the Platinum Trophy, but I wanted to make sure I call this out because it reminds me a lot of Forspoken, where it came out, had its bugs, it had its problems, and our gut reaction in this TikTok world that we live in is just to be super critical and not see the finer parts, the things that are actually pretty great about the game. And I think there's a lot to love about Outlaws. Just as much as it has its flaws, there's a lot to love here. So give it a shot, especially if you are a longtime Star Wars fan like myself.
How you doing, big guy? Everything's fine, buddy.
All right, getting into the top 3, so exciting and maybe appropriately. Coming in at number 3, a game that will probably cement my time, especially those first 3 weeks, changing diapers, bottle feeds, and a lot of sleepless nights. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, I do have to mention, I skipped Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm sorry. I played it for 5 hours. The battle system was just not my jam. But I'll tell you what, after 65 to 70 hours of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I'm all in. Number 1, one of my favorite JRPGs of all time. I rolled credits in 3 and I was like, oh my gosh. I'm sorry, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'm coming back for you. I already got a copy of Torna. If you watch my recent pickups video, I'm going to go back and play the DLCs for all of these games. What a wonderful game Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is. I really do think it just takes everything from the prior 2 games, from what I played of 2 and everything I played in 1, because I rolled credits in that game and it's, again, one of my favorites. I think it refines and kind of streamlines the battle system in a way that just feels really right and fun to play. I mean, every time that I get into a heated boss battle, of which I died many times, I was playing on the easiest difficulty setting and I still lost a number of battles, and it felt like really fair. It felt like, oh yeah, I wasn't using the chain attacks the way I should have. I didn't have my party and the classes that they were using configured in the right way. And it doesn't, the game and its battle system doesn't have you like buried in the menu system. I think it's just enough where it kind of has, there's an element of strategy to it that isn't too taxing on the brain, especially for how sleep deprived I was. I wasn't looking to play something like even Final Fantasy XII with its Gambit system. I feel like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 strikes a great balance between strategy and simplicity. And I really appreciated that about the battle system, given how tired I was when I was often playing this game. But I really like the cast of characters. The story, while I may not remember it in a year because I was so tired while I was playing it, it deals with some heavy themes. I mean, talking about or questioning mortality because these characters live for a very short amount of time, finding contentment in your life and not constantly worrying about and looking back at the past and wondering, how could I have made things different? And they wrestle with that quite a bit. But beyond that, holy crap, did Kojima direct this game? I felt like 90% of the time I was watching these like Lord of the Rings extended edition movies. I mean, not just like 5 to 8 minute cutscenes, 20 to 30 minute cutscenes, which was kind of to my benefit because when you have a child, most of the time, the first few weeks, all right, I was very fortunate. My baby slept a lot. But even during those times, there's days where I might play a game and start playing for 5 minutes, and then baby's fussy. So I walk away for 15, 20 minutes, diaper change, all those different things, get her back down, and then back to the controller. And I play for 15 minutes. Baby's fussy again, so you go back, change a diaper, help make sure my wife has everything she needs, right? Get back to the couch. Rinse and repeat for like literally 70 hours that I played this game. So whether I actually played for 70 hours or there was at least 10 to 15 hours of idle time, who really knows? But the cutscenes definitely played to my benefit because half the time I could just have my baby on my lap, she's sleeping away, or I'm giving her a bottle and I'm watching this movie play out with Noah, Mio, and the surrounding cast of characters. But again, what I love about the Xenoblade series especially is just these sprawling open environments and just the joys of grinding, doing side quests, getting back into that world, finding these giant monstrous enemies that you can just tackle. It's just one of my favorite it's become one of my favorite JRPG series because of those wide open environments and also the soundtracks that complement playing the game. Again, terrific JRPG. I don't think it overstays its welcome either. It took me 60 hours to beat. I'm sure if I spent more time doing side quests, I would have spent 80 to 100. But if you just want to focus on the story, you can get through it in about 60 hours. And I feel like that was just the perfect amount of time to wrap up that story, have this very conclusive narrative to its characters and where everything wraps up. Just thoroughly enjoyed my time with it, and I can't emphasize enough just how much it will cement those first few weeks with my daughter. But special highlight and shout out to my boy, Riku. That green little puffball bastard brought the energy that I needed during those sleep-deprived weeks. So funny. Anytime that guy opened his mouth, I laughed. Just his appearance with that giant head of hair. He's like a little green Kirby. Anything he said just had me laughing. But I think the extended cast of characters is pretty great as well. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, my goodness, what an RPG. One of my favorites of the year.
We don't know what lies ahead, so let's go carefully.
Indeed. I want to be out of here as fast as possible, but haste can only spell trouble.
This place rich in ore and gemstone. Speed is of essence. All treasure will belong to Riku.
Coming in at number 2 is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. You knew you had to see it at some point in this video. My goodness, what a great follow-up to Final Fantasy VII Remake. One of my favorite games in the year that it came out. I think it continues to refine the action-oriented combat as opposed to that turn-based system that we were used to of the original. What I really, really appreciated about Rebirth is, as someone who did not finish the original Final Fantasy VII is how it really takes you on a journey with these characters. And it also gives you standout, memorable, character developing moments for each of the supporting cast of characters. Not just Tifa, Cloud, and Aerith, but Barret. I guess I want to be a little bit careful because some people probably haven't played the game, and there's some characters that I don't really want to mention because they pop up at different places. And as someone who, as I said earlier, did not play the original, it's made some changes to how the story is playing out. So some people are in love with that. Some people are kind of mad about it. I'm kind of indifferent because I'm really just along for the ride, and whatever creative differences they might make to this trilogy of remakes doesn't really bother me. I'm really just here to see what happens next. So very interested to see what they do in the third and final game. The last thing I'll say though is all those people that gave me grief about enjoying the open world Ubisoft check the box gameplay formula, I saw you. I saw you going through the world of Rebirth, doing every single miscellaneous activity, checking the box, sinking the towers. It's pretty fun, isn't it? It's pretty fun. Although I still think and stand by, there's a little bit too much game in Rebirth. And I even got to a point, as much as I have 100%ed and platinumed nearly every Assassin's Creed game, including the more open world ones, there was too much game here for me. And I had to just beeline the story at a certain point. Otherwise, I probably still wouldn't have rolled credits in Rebirth. But all in all, one of the best games of the year, no doubt. Cannot wait to see what they do in this third and final installment. And given how much game there is in Rebirth, I still need to go back and maybe clean up some of the side activities, hopefully in the near future. But my goodness, what an amazing game.
Hey, that's nothing to sneeze at.
All right, now last but certainly not least, we have my game of the year. And I feel like typically you know, right? You start the game up, you're making your way through it, and you're like, there is no way I played a better game this year so far, nor will I probably play a better game than this one right here. And that was certainly the case for me. The moment I booted this game up, I started putting time into it, I rolled credits, I got to the end, I got the Platinum Trophy, I knew this was my game of the year. The first of its kind, a quadruple A game. I'm of course talking about Ubisoft's Skull and Bones. I'm totally kidding. I've not even played this, but I do want to. I got it for $9.99 on GameFly, so we'll see how that is. That whole quadruple A game. Yeah, all right, Ubisoft, whatever you have to say. I'm kidding. It is Astrobot. There was no other game that was going to surpass my love in 2024 than Astrobot. 3D platformer, a sequel to Astro's Playroom, which was, I believe, my game of the year in 2020. If not, it was certainly top 3. They took everything that was great about Astro's Playroom and just continued to expand upon it. From beginning to end, the game continued to surprise me. I had a stupid smile on my face the entire time I was playing it. I think Team Asobi continues to make the best use of the DualSense controller, and they also just, what a remarkable way to highlight and celebrate and bring attention to PlayStation's rich and deep history. The number of times I was going through some of these levels and I would see references to characters or games that I had no idea what they were referencing just goes to show that while I think I've played a lot of PlayStation games over my time, certainly haven't played them all, but the attention to detail, the creativity, the level design, just the amount of personality and charm in Astrobot, it's just overflowing with all of it, literally until the credits roll. My game of the year for so many reasons, and while I won't spoil those very particular levels, there was one per galaxy, you know what they are. I was texting my brother-in-law, I was texting my friends, have you gotten here yet? Have you gotten here yet? I can't believe they did this. This is amazing. So cool. It really brought back the childlike joy I got when I played Pokemon when I was a kid, when I opened up an N64 game on Christmas and put it in my console, the PlayStation 1 and 2, when I got my PS2 and I put Jak and Daxter and the Precursor Legacy in my system and I played that for the first time, and just the, again, just overflowing with joy and excitement going through that game. That's how I felt with Astrobot. Childlike excitement as an adult playing this game. Certainly the best game I played this year, and one I'll be coming back to for years to come. And I wouldn't be surprised if, when I look back on this decade, it will be one of my favorite games as well. All right, everyone, those are my top 10 games of 2024, including some honorable mentions. Again, plenty that I still have not had a chance to play. I'm sure going to be sneaking in over the last few months of December, trying to play stuff like Indiana Jones, and then planning ahead and thinking about 2025. What are some of my most anticipated games for next year and my gaming goals? Well, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video and all of my videos in 2024. I definitely kind of tried to make more videos and put more time and energy into the channel this year, and just really enjoy interacting with all of you. That's why I do these videos, is one, to have that outlet to talk about games, but also to connect with people who also love video games. So definitely stick around into 2025. I have plenty of ideas and videos in the pipeline that I'm looking forward to share. But in the meantime, let me know down below once again, what were some of your favorite games of 2024? Thanks again, and we'll see you in 2025.